school here in Lexington. I was born here, and I moved in and out, and I can tell you for sure, this is the place to be. I love it here. And I have, in the last year, become involved with the Kentucky Student Voice Team. So the Kentucky Student Voice Team is a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're an intergenerational group of about 100 plus middle, high school students and our senior advisor network. And all of us work together to co-create more just and democratic schools across Kentucky. And so we split our organization into three major groups: our research team, our policy team, and our storytelling team. So our policy team works to advance student voice, student representation, and equity in legislation. Our storytelling team works with our Journalism Institute, the new EDU. We publish stories and opinion edition pieces on important subjects in education. And then our research team does original research across the state to address problems like the climate of our schools and the effects of COVID-19. We've done a ton of great work that you all can read about on the website, but I'm a pretty new member for our group, about a year in. But when I came into the group, there was this bill in the House and the Senate that was getting passed through, and it was on the forefront of the people who I was working with minds. And over the summer, it turned out that this was going to be my thing for the next year. So here I am to tell you all a little bit about what this is. So I have these papers, and I'll pass them around. And this has some information I'll get to, but I want to have the paper in your hand. Amendment 2 is an amendment that'll be on the ballot, and many of you may know this information, but I'm just going to go over real quick. I have a spiel.
Get that spiel, because I think we need the spiel.
That's okay. Okay, so Amendment 2 will be on the ballot, and this amendment, it reads, we'll have an introduction and then the actual language, and the amendment reads, I can't recite it exactly, but it will allow, and the exact words are, the General Assembly to fund schools outside the system of common schools. Now, that is a little unclear to the average person. Now, what that means is that the General Assembly will be allowed to fund private schools with a public account. Now,
say that again?
It will allow public schools and public funds to be used for private education. So the real, and I'll get more into this, the real message that we want to send here is pretty simple. Public schools and public dollars, they go together. Public dollars are for public schools. This is not about private schools, this is about public schools. It's about keeping the public dollars that we pay taxes on, that we have had protected for all of Kentucky's history in public schools. So the specific technicality of the amendment is it's going to strike down 7 sections of the Constitution that will allow the legislature to basically fund whatever program they want. There's no restriction, there's no limit, there's no laws about what discrimination will be allowed or will be prohibited. It is a blank check. What is most likely to happen is a voucher style program, because that is the most, I would say, egregious version of private funding, private school support programs, basically. So the Kentucky Student Voice Team has become a part of a coalition called Protect Our Schools Kentucky. And this coalition is a group of organizations that are in education. Some of those include the Jefferson County Teachers Association, the Louisville Urban League, the Council for Better Education, and several other groups that are all pitching in to fight the good fight, as one might say. So in the past several months, it's been pretty quiet because things have been heating up. But in the last month, there's been a lot of activity. And my job here is to kind of give you all that brief rundown and then tell you what we're hoping it's going to look like for the next couple of months. So in the last month, the biggest thing that's come out is this thing in your hand, which is a report from the KY Center for Economic Policy. This is a great report. If you have a half an hour to read over it, it is great.
What'd you say the name of it is?
It's the Kentucky Center for Economic Policy. And they do public policy research and then publish those reports for the Commonwealth.
What was the name of the report?
It's called, it's got a longer name. The impact of vouchers on
It's on the
public education.
Turn the page over.
The impact of diverting public money to private school vouchers in Kentucky.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Didn't quite roll off my tongue.
No, I can understand why.
So,
who is this group now? I mean, we are assuming, just like we assume that the legislature with this name, that they have these nice names for, vouchers and so tell us how this group,
The Kentucky for Center for
is
Economic
something
Policy?
that yeah.
They're a progressive group.
yeah.
And they've been around, they're solid.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted you.
You want him to answer it?
Some of us.
Here, I
don't.
got your back.
We're here to help you.
Right, we're all working together.
Oh, yeah.
We're like a locomotive. We're going together.
All together, chug down the track.
There you go.
So this
Thanks.
report is very interesting, and there's a couple of things that I'll draw your attention to a little bit later on. But this front page is the biggest thing that we want to tell the voters, which is this is a snapshot for Fayette County that shows that we'll lose if a Florida-style voucher scheme is put into place, which would make that would be about 30% of the current education funding would go to private schools. Be about $1.2 billion worth of funding that would be diverted potentially. For Fayette County, that translates to a loss of about $55 million, a little under 400 educator jobs, and almost 10% in total budget reduction for Fayette County. Now, we love our schools. I love Henry Clay. We're getting a new school, but I won't be around for it.
Right.
But that impact is very, very significant. And the messaging that we want to have is that this amendment is about that loss. It's not about private schools. We want to be very clear, this is about vouchers. This is not about school choice. That's a word that I never say. We never say school choice because that is the framing that the amendment is using to convince people that is a good thing.
Right.
And the reason that our opponents use the school choice framing is because it's effective. It's been effective in other states, and it could be effective in Kentucky if we aren't very clear about the messaging that we use. So the Protect Our Schools Kentucky campaign has focused on the messaging of the voucher amendment. This is Amendment 2, or the voucher amendment. This is vouchers and Amendment 2. That's the phrasing we want to use when we're talking to voters about how this amendment is going to affect Kentucky. So when you look at the back page of this report, this is one of the things that I'd like to highlight that Kentucky Student Voice Team has learned, but that also Protect Our Schools Kentucky has been focusing on, is that besides the economic impact for our budgets, it's also unclear as to how it will affect our students who are often disadvantaged. The history of the voucher programs, as the report notes, is all the way back to when our schools were segregated. And we know that when in other states voucher programs are implemented, those go to 65 to 90% of the time, those go to families that are already planning to send their kids to private schools. And in Kentucky, that group makes more than 50% more than the average Kentuckian. So we're looking at a group of people who are already going to be sending their people to private schools that are going to benefit from this. We also know that the math doesn't add up for private school tuition. In Kentucky, there are only 75 counties in Kentucky out of our 120, which is a ridiculous number, that don't have an accredited private school. Those are the rural areas that are going to be heavily hit by this amendment. Now, in our larger metropolitan areas, we have private schools that charge on average $15,000 to $17,000 per year. A voucher that will only pay $3,000 or $4,000 will not put a dent in that. That's one of those other big things we want to say, is that if you're a family who's considering your public school that may not be living up to your expectations, or this idea that you will get to now freely choose a superior private school, that's a narrative we want to really shift, because we know that will not be able to happen because people won't be able to pay for it. But B, that we want to focus the narrative on, okay, this funding is used to increase our teachers' salary. It's used to have art teachers. A couple of years ago in Fayette County, there was some budget cutting, and in the elementary schools, there was some concern about loss of art teachers. That's a small budget cut, nothing compared to this. If we try to take that kind of economic information, when we're talking to voters, we want to talk about the impact in that moment. And there was a huge kerfuffle about how we're going to lose all these art classes. These art teachers aren't going to be able to work in the schools anymore. People were really upset about that. That's what we want to take from this data, is that 55 million number can kind of seem like, okay, 55 million, how do we know how much money that is? Well, that's the difference between an art class and no art class. That's the difference between new bathrooms and old bathrooms. That's the difference between your kid being able to go from K through 12 through a smooth system to having to bounce around to a magnet school within the Fayette County system. So the overall point for this is that in the next several months, Protect Our Schools Kentucky is going to have a lot of different events. And we have some information that I can send to you, Ms. Summers. And
Karen, but I think Kelsey's already sent me like the dates of the football games and all that
yes,
stuff.
exactly. So Ms. Coots is our organizer. She works with Blue Dot Consulting, the same group who I believe ran Charles, was it Booker's campaign, which was, and she has also worked on the abortion referendum.
She ran that.
And so she has had some success that I respect very much.
And the merge
There's also
alum.
Amendment 2.
So she's going round 2 Amendment 2. We're hoping she goes 2 for 2. But the big takeaway for me is that the Kentucky Student Voice team is going to keep working on getting those student stories out there about what are the students losing. What we are looking for, what Protect Our Schools Kentucky is looking for, is telling these voters who are not sure about what does this amendment mean? What does yes and no mean? Just saying, this amendment is asking if you would like public funds to be used for private schools. It's a pretty simple no. So that's our big thing.
If only the amendment were written so simply.
If only the amendment were working simply, and that is one of the crucial things, especially in, say, Louisville. The way that we anticipate, say, voters of color voting is not as we would like it to be for our success. And so those kind of arguments about how much does this cost and what is this really going to look like? There's no regulation for these private schools. There's precedent for there to be no regulation. And we have our state constitution since 1891 has protected our ability to have public schools funded by public dollars. That's pretty simple. That's what we're trying to protect.
But once you get rid of the Constitution on that, you get rid of all the safeguards.
Exactly.
And the students who will be most effective will be the special ed students.
Exactly.
Right now, the private schools do not offer special ed. At
No.
my public school, elementary school, private Catholic school, right down the street, speech, OT, and physical therapy, they would send their students to us because they have those services. And that's typically what they do around the state. Those services, they would, and we would cut teachers in all these school systems. KSIP has got every county on here.
Exactly.
And you can look in the county and it tells you how many staff cut people will be lost, how much money total across that county per year. And there's no guarantee they might get more money, even more money. I mean, the national GOP directive is to get rid of public education, right?
Yeah.
Get rid of Department of Ed.
And which website did you say that you can click on
It's
the
the
various
Kentucky
counties?
Senate that's on-
This one, okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and there should be a QR code in the bottom
Yeah.
corner of that, and you can access for every county in Kentucky. You have a relative in Fleming County, send them the Fleming County one. Relative in Perry County, send them the Perry County one. That's the kind of the stuff that we'd love for you all to be able to do. Don't have any questions for me? I know I've spoken a little quickly. I'm kind of used to this spiel, but I hope everyone can hear me in the back.
I don't think people realize how strategic the way they did the bill. We deliberately did Amendment 1 to be what already is a law, that you can't vote unless you're already a citizen. They did it strategically to say Amendment 2. Why? Because in Kentucky, when you hear the word Amendment 2, what you think? Guns. So people that are not well informed would say yes to the first one, of course, and they would hope they would say yes to the second one without knowing it.
Yeah.
And think about it, we're gonna have a long ballot in November. People are gonna be tired when they get through voting on the ballot, and that's at the end of it.
There are organizations that are out there, I'm sorry, Elaine, that are fighting against this.
Right.
And at Fancy Farm, there's several, they're student-led and others, and they're pulling these poor families over there and telling them to vote yes. I walked over and said, don't vote yes on that, but people are fooled by it. They're fooled by the language,
Well,
they're
the
fooled by.
commercial,
And
I've
I've
seen the commercials.
Yes.
The commercial is all broached in school choice.
Yes.
Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah.
Well, it will be school choice. The schools choose not to take those kids.
That's a great point you're saying, is that the private schools have no obligation to admit anyone.
Well, that's the reason why the legislature pushed for DEI. Because that way, you can't sue and say you discriminate against my kids. There's no DEI.
I just want, when I was first learning of this, and it was a good while back, I have to admit, I was not familiar with the term common schools.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's gonna be one of the biggest bugaboos for this, because I think if I had not heard that term, particularly in reference to our public school system, I think I'd be a little confused. And I
Exactly.
think that's going to be an additional confusion for
Well, what is
voters
that?
on this.
Common schools.
Public schools. Public schools.
It was helpful with the language that you gave us to use, just in talking to,
Yeah,
our neighbors.
you wanna use voucher amendment,
Yes.
amendment two, the voucher amendment, vouchers and amendment two are the things that I tend to go to.
And I think we could say common schools is the old-fashioned term that was used in the 1800s to mean our public schools.
We're not going back.
But I mean, that is what it's saying.
Yeah. And the framing is deceptive too, because before the amendment text, it prompts you to promote school choice in Kentucky. Would you like to vote on this?
That's right.
And then it gives you the language, and we really have to be very clear about this amendment is about defunding the public schools by giving money to private schools.
But there's a lot of money being put on this, and the Bluegrass Institute and others are sending a lot of op-eds now to the Herald, to the Courier Journal, and to local papers. So, I mean, and private schools are really pushing it,
Yeah.
and churches. To be honest with
Oh,
you,
yeah.
there are churches that are salivating to get that public money.
Yeah.
And they're tax exempt already.
It kind of just ends up spiraling in. Yeah.
Thank you.
So what can we do to support you in your organization? Do y'all need donations, social media? What can we do?
So I think it's a combination. I can answer this from the C3 and the C4 perspective. So as part of the Protect Our Schools Kentucky, we really need amplification of the events. Donations are obviously great for Protect Our Schools, but amplification of these events, like at these football games, or doing the canvassing work that we're starting to really ramp up. You know, we recently hired several directors. We've gotten some money from larger education-related organizations nationally that has allowed us to expand the operations. But we want the people to use all that money that we've gotten. So I think the biggest two things are amplification of those events. Go to the Protect Our Schools website. Go to the Mobilize website. Sign up for canvassing in your county. Sign up to write an op-ed. Give your perspective on common schools is just a word, old-timey word for public schools. This is very simple, you know. And then the second thing is the donation element. If you have relatives, if you have people who are interested, the Mobilize page is available as well.
What about the yard signs? Are they still gonna have? the
We are
yard
working on
signs?
that right now. It's coming
Okay.
in the next couple weeks, I think.
Okay.
So I can add to that. I think we are going to be handing them out here.
Okay.
One of the partners